Chapter 2, Section 7, Solving Equations with Rational Numbers. The objective of this lesson is to solve equations working with rational numbers. Now remember that you can add or subtract, multiply or divide the same number to both sides of an equation, and the equation will remain true. With these equations, ultimately we want to isolate the variable. Now when we solve equations, we've got a couple of steps to remember. We want to clear fractions, simplify and combine like terms, undo addition and subtraction, undo multiplication and division, then solve for the variable. And last but not least, go ahead and check our answer. So in this first example, x divided by 1.2 or x over 1.2 equals 15. We want to isolate the variable x. How do we undo the division that's happening to x? By multiplying. As long as I multiply the left-hand side, I have to multiply the right-hand side. On the left-hand side, because we're dividing by 1.2, we can undo that by multiplying by 1.2. I'm going to write 1.2 as a fraction because that might be easier for us to understand. As long as I multiply the right-hand side by 1.2 over 1. Multiply the left-hand side by the fraction, have to multiply the right-hand side by the fraction. 1.2 in the numerator and 1.2 in the denominator will cancel out. On the right-hand side, I have 15, and I can think of 15 as a fraction of 15 over 1. Well, I've got two fractions, and I want to multiply them together, so I'd simply multiply the numerators together, 15 times 1.2, and then the denominators together, 1 times 1. So on the left-hand side, I'm going to end up with just simply x. On the right-hand side, equals 18. In our second example, let's clear the fractions first. Now, if we look at these fractions, I've got a denominator of 6 and a denominator of 3. So what I'm going to do is find the least common denominator between 6 and 3. That is 6. So I'm going to multiply the entire, every term, by 6. So I can wrap these terms in parentheses, as long as I remember to multiply the right-hand side by the same number. Like I said, we're going to multiply by 6, or we can write it as a fraction, 6 over 1, as long as I multiply the right-hand side by 6 over 1. Now, on the left-hand side, we're going to use the distributive property. We're going to take 6 and multiply it by y, and then 6 and multiply it by this fraction. When I do that, I get 6 times y is y, then 6 times 1 is 6. But 6 over 6 is actually 1. And remember to bring down the subtraction sign. So the left-hand side will simplify to 6y minus 1. The right-hand side, I've got 2/3 times 6. I can simply multiply straight across. And when I do that, I'm going to end up with 2 times 6 is 12. 3 times 1 is 3. Now 12/3 can simplify. 12 divided by 3 will simplify to 4. Now all of my fractions are cleared. Let's continue to isolate the variable. Y is being multiplied by 6, and 1 is being subtracted from it. So we are going to undo addition and subtraction before we undo the multiplication and division right now. So, how do I undo subtracting 1? I add 1, as long as I do it to the other side. This minus 1 and plus 1 will cancel out, so the left-hand side will end up to be 6y equals, the right-hand side will simplify to 4 plus 1 as 5. So I have 6y equals 5. Now I want to undo the multiplication that's happening. Y is being multiplied by 6. I would undo that by division. Dividing by the same number, as long as I do it to the other side. These 6's will cancel out, and I'll end up with y. On the right-hand side, I'll simply end up with 5/6. So y equals 5/6. In the next example, we have 5/6 x equals 5/8. We want to clear our fractions. We can clear our fractions by multiplying by the least common denominator. Now, when I look at 6 and 8, I immediately think of 48. However, that's not the least common denominator. There is a number that is less than 48 that 6 and 8 go into evenly, and that number is 24. So, what I'm going to do is multiply the left-hand side and multiply the right-hand side. Now, I'm going to multiply 24 to each side, and I'm going to write 24 as a fraction. So 24, remember, is our least common denominator. So 24 over 1 times the left-hand side, and 24 over 1 times the right-hand side. Now, I can go ahead and simplify. 6 goes into 24 evenly. 6 goes into 6 once. 6 goes into 24 4 times. So I'm dividing a 6 out from the denominator and the numerator. This is simplifying first. Let's take a look at the right-hand side. 8 goes into 8 once. 8 goes into 24 3 times. Now, on the left-hand side, I'm going to simplify. 4, the numerators, are going to be multiplied. 4 times 5, x over 1 times 1. On the left-hand side, I have 5 times 3 in my numerator and 8 times 1 in my denominator. I'm sorry, 1 times 1 in my denominator. Let's continue to simplify on the left-hand side. 4 times 5 is 20. Don't forget the x, and that's over 1. On the left-hand side, 5 times 3 is 15. 1 times 1 is 1, so it's going to be 15 over 1. Now, any number divided by 1 is itself. So 20x divided by 1 simply is 20x. 15 divided by 1 simply is 15. Now we're getting close to isolating the variable. There is one more math operation that is happening to x, and that's multiplication. We'll undo the multiplication by division. So the left-hand side will be divided by 20, because we want to undo multiplying by 20, as long as I divide the right-hand side by 20. 20 divided by 20 will drop out, and I'll end up with x on the left-hand side. On the right-hand side, I have a fraction of 15/20. I can simplify that. 5 is a common factor of 15 and 20. I divide the numerator by 5, I divide the denominator by 5, and I would end up with 3/4. X is isolated. X is 3/4.